Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, ahlan wa sahlan, marhaban. Welcome to our Akhlaaq session. We have resumed. We know we took a short break, but inshallah ta'ala, we have resumed since this week. So this is the 18th lesson. And inshallah, bidnillah, without any further ado, we will hand over to Brother Farid to do his session, inshallah. Let me just ensure that he's a host right now. No.
نعم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So where we left off last time, we were looking at some of the rulings of going to the masjid, right? Some of the sunan, what actions are disliked, right, in going to the masjid. For example, what type of food we consume before going to the masjid. For example, garlic or other types of food which may contribute to bad odor and so on, right? So we looked at many of the rulings as it relates to going to the masjid, the mustahab, what is disliked, and so on. And we also looked at some of the things which are not allowed in the masjid, right? Some of the things which are prohibited. So for example, using the masjid as a place of business transaction. And when I say masjid, we mean inside the masjid itself, right? So we're not talking about the outside of the masjid, right? And, some of the ulama, they have, various discussions as to, what type of adjoining rooms can be used and so on, right? So this is a lengthy discussion amongst the scholars of fiqh and so on. But what is understood in this regard is that the masjid should not be a place of business, right? Business transaction and so on inside the masjid itself, right? So inshallah, we'll just do a recap of some of the things we were looking at, because it's been a while since we last had the class due to the break, right? So before we go over the ruling on the garlic, which there's not really much to reiterate, because I've said that this falls under the category of makruh, right? But in a hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at the top, so we have the ayah from Allah, but below that there is the hadith from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Man tawadda'a lis-salati fa-asbagha al-wudu'a thumma masha ila as-salati al-maktuba فصلاها مع الناس أو مع الجماعة أو في المسجد غفر الله الذنوب." Right? So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is speaking about the merits of going to the masjid, right? And he mentioned a couple of things. He said, whoever performs wudu, right, and not just performs wudu, but performs it well, right? And this is something that is neglected a lot of the times, because we live in a time where everybody is in haste, right? And all of these things are overlapping, because we mentioned other things too as it relates to going to the masjid, not to be hasty, and that is one of the rulings mentioned in the book, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prohibited us from being hasty in many aspects of ibadah, right? Either be going to the masjid, either be praying a salah. There's a hadith where there was a man who was praying and he was just rushing through the salah, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, go back and pray, for you have not prayed. That is not salah, that is not accepted, right? So we should not allow these anxieties of life to get the better of us, because really and truly that is what it is. It's unnecessary anxiety. And the Sharia, if you look at the Sharia, it prevents all of these loopholes. All of these things are from the Sharia team. So you're rushing to the masjid. You don't want to miss a certain number of rak'at. Why? Because you don't want to make it over. You don't want to make it up again. It doesn't really matter, right? As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in the hadith that go to the masjid, don't be hasty, and make up whatever you've missed. Whatever you've missed, it's not the end of the world. Just make it up back, right? So these are some things to take into consideration. All right. So he said that whoever performs will do well. Right. So that means you take your time. That doesn't mean that you're gonna take the whole day, right? But you take your time and you perform the wudu well because it's an act of worship as well, right? And there are adhkars which are said during the wudu as well. Before the wudu, during the wudu, and after. Not much, but all of these things can be done, right? And especially if you're alone, because you don't have distraction. You're not really communicating with anybody when you're just alone, right? So he said that whoever performs the wudu well and then walks to the prescribed prayer, right? And then praise it with the jama'ah, praise it with the congregation, right? In the masjid. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him of his sins, right? So this hadith, it is the messenger is outlining the benefits of going to the masjid on time, performing wudu correctly, and praying in a jama'ah, right? For those who are able to do so, right? Because as you said, that when it comes to masjid visitation, it's because of where we were living in this part of the world, especially as a minority. It's not like you live in some other countries where masjids are everywhere. In every avenue and every street, you can find a masjid. That's different. You can easily walk to the masjid, right? There are about 2 masjids in St. Catherine, if I'm correct, right? So you're not going to have easy access to the masjid all the time, depending on who is driving and who isn't, right? So whatever opportunity arises, it is best to take opportunity of that because it's not like you get the opportunity of going there all the time. Right? We're speaking about people who may not have the means to have frequent access to the masjid, right? So whenever they do, they should make use of the time therein, right? Right. So we mentioned what is makruh as it relates to going to the masjid, right? Garlic and any other type of food which gives off a bad odor, right? Because you don't want to disturb people, you don't want to cause others to be distracted, right? So the scholars, they have said that this is makruh, right? It is not a sin, but it is not recommended to do so. You should stay home if that is the case, right? I went through some of hadith as it relates to this and so on, right? So we're doing a recap, so we're just going through some of what we mentioned, right? And as we mentioned, going to the masjid early. Just now we talked about that, right? Going to the masjid on time. So if you're going to the masjid on time, you leave out at a reasonable time, then you won't have the temptation to rush, right? Because if you look at it, why do people rush when they're at the masjid? Why do people rush when they hear the salah has started? And they're rushing to wudu, they're rushing to reach inside. Why is that the case? Because they're late. So number 2 now is getting there on time, right? Getting there on time. And even if you're actually at the masjid, before the salah has begun, the adhan was called. The adhan was called, so you definitely know that it's time for salah. So instead of loitering outside or anywhere else, you try and find yourself inside and you try to train the children as such. Right? Of course, they're not going to be perfect. It is children's nature to play, right? But they have to go with the mindset that once the time for salah has begun, then you should be inside the masjid, right? Or try to be in the process of getting inside the masjid, right? So all of the playing should, start to slow down. If they're sweaty or whatever, you wipe them down and you get them ready for salah. And after salah, they can resume what they were doing in the first place, right? So it is important that if we have the means, as we said, when it comes to masjid visitation and so on, that we should try to get there on time. Either it be the salah or the Jummah. And the Jummah is very important as well in terms of getting there before the Imam has given the salam, right? Because as you know from the hadith that the angels, once the Imam has ascended the pulpit, then the angels will close their books and the khutbah has begun, and they've already recorded who is present, right? So in the hadith, it is said, I'll just repeat the hadith in English. So the messenger, he said that had people known what is the nida, had people know what is the calling, the call to prayer, right? And the first row, and had they found no way except by casting lots, they would have casted lots. And had people known what is in the benefits of being early, they would have raced to it. And had they known what is in their Isha and the Fajr prayers, they would have come to them, even if they had to crawl in order to get there. So he's speaking about the first row and getting to the masjid on time, right? And the fada'il, fadilatain, sorry, the benefits of the Isha and the Fajr Salah, right? And recently, at Spanish Town Masjid, they have begun this sunnah of coming to the masjid for the Isha Salah, right? For those who can make it, right? And this is a good practice, right? And it brings the community together. It brings the brothers and the sisters together, right? And there is tremendous blessings in it, right? There, especially the hadith mentions the Isha and the Fajr Salah, right? Number 3, as we mentioned, going to the masjid with sakina, right? Calmness, serenity, and peace. And so there's no need to rush to anything, right? It's not the end of the world. As the messenger, he said that when he heard some people doing this, right? He said, what is wrong with these people, right? Ma sha'nukum, what is the matter with these people, right? And they replied, they said to him that we are hurrying, we're trying to reach the salah on time. And then he said to them, do not do so. When you come to your prayer, adhere to sakina, right? Come to the salah with sakina. Whatever part of the prayer you get, then pray it. And whatever you have missed, then you complete it, right? So there's no need to rush. Number 4. Right, so these are some du'as that we mentioned as it relates to going to the masjid. While you're going to the masjid, so one dua, this is a dua that we memorize whenever we're going to the masjid, right? And there's a longer version mentioned here, and you have the short version for it. Right? And we have the supplication for entering the masjid, right? So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when you enter the masjid, you say Allahumma aftahli abwaba rahmatika, right? Wa idha kharaja falyaqul Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik. So when you enter the masjid, you say, oh Allah, open the gates of your mercy for me, right? Wa idha kharaja faqul, when you leave, then say, oh Allah, I ask you from your favor. So this is the dua to enter the masjid and the dua to leave. And by now, everybody should know these two duas. Right? And we also mentioned the importance of entering with the right foot and exiting with the left foot. This is of the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We begin everything with the right, and we exit with the left. This is from the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right, and the next one we looked at is that the importance of the tahiyatul masjid, right? So as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, right, that when you enter the masjid, then observe 2 units of salah before you sit. So it is the first thing that is done, the first thing, right? So as soon as you arrive at the masjid, as long as you're not, you should try to make it the first thing, right? So as soon as you enter the masjid, then you try to offer the 2 units of sunnah, right? And you then do what you're doing, right? So even if you go inside the masjid, for whatever reason, you don't just sit down. a lot of people you may find doing this. Either be out of ignorance or they don't really understand the importance. And many of us, we've been brought up in a culture of not understanding the status of Sunnah. So, many of us, we've been brought up, and the mindset we have is that it's Sunnah. So, if it's Sunnah, then I don't have to do it. Hold on, let me check this message. Yes. So the ulama have difference of opinion on this. The Hanafiya, they are of the opinion that you shouldn't do it because the khutbah has begun. I'm gonna get to our view, the view that we follow here in Jamaica and lots of places in the world, right? But the Hanafi view is that it's not supposed to be done because the khutbah has begun, and really and truly when the khutbah is being observed, then everybody should be still. However, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and some of the Shafi, they are of the opinion that you can do a tahiyatul masjid during the khutbah. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So whatever ruling you're following, so you might go to some places in the world where the Hanafi madhab is the dominant fiqh, and you will find people just entering the masjid and they will not offer any sunnah, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But for other viewpoints, it is totally acceptable to observe your tahiyatul masjid during the khutbah. However, you come to the masjid and the khutbah is about to end, it doesn't make sense to do it, right? Because the khutbah is about to end, so you might as well just wait until the imam finishes the last part of the khutbah and you begin the salah, right? Yeah. Right. So it's the first thing that is to be done before sitting down. Right. So if you're going to the masjid to read from the mushaf, whatever it is, the first thing you do, you offer your sunnah, and then you move on to whatever you were about to do. So the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, this is the evidence. إذا دخل أحدكم المسجد فليركع ركعتين قبل أن يجلس. When any of you enter the masjid, let him perform 2 rak'ahs, all right, 2 rak'atain before he sits. There's another hadith which says, I don't remember it's different wording, but same meaning, right? فَلَا يَجْلِسْ حَتَّى يُصَلِّي رَكْعَتَيْنِ. Let him not sit unless he performs 2 rak'atain. Right. All right. And we discuss the ruling on it, that it is highly recommended, right? And the first view, it says that it is compulsory, but this is just taking into consideration the hadith by itself. But when you put the other views together, it comes under the category of highly recommended, right? All right, and we looked at the virtues of sitting inside the masjid, congregating inside the masjid, speaking about issues which are worldly, right? There's nothing wrong with this. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum did this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this, right? So the masjid is not just a place of worship, but it's also a place where, the Musallin, the people who come there are allowed to socialize, right? So it's not just a place of worship, it's a place of socialization. It's a place of eating, it's a place of drinking, it's a place of playing, right? And we've given evidences for many of these things, right? And we said that, sometimes there's a clash between culture and what is actually from the sources. Because a lot of people, especially from certain generations, they have this mindset that it's not permissible to do many things which are actually permissible, right? So they believe that your, children shouldn't be in the masjid. Playing isn't allowed. You shouldn't, sometimes if you speak a little loud, they might get upset, right? All of these things. So we need to understand the rulings, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said about anything, right? And what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam has laid down in the Sunnah, right? So that's the first thing you have to look at, right? So we looked at the permissibility of lying in the masjid, right? Sleeping, lying down, whatever it is. And many evidences were given. One of the primary evidence which was given was that of the people of the Sufa, right? The people of the Sufa were many of the Sahaba who they had migrated from Mecca to Medina. And because of the situation, many of them had to leave their possessions back home. So they literally came to Medina with nothing. And as such, they had no homes, they had no material possession, no money, nothing. So the masjid was their only place of sanctuary, and a place where they could rest their heads, right? So this is an evidence that it is allowed to sleep inside the masjid, and we looked at some of the guidelines, right, of doing this. So one of them is that you sleep in a position that is appropriate. You don't just spread your body parts in your home. You don't lie down in the masjid in a compromising position where maybe your aura is exposed, right? Either be men or women, right? So there are guidelines, and it is very important that when you're going through these rulings, we always specify. We don't forget to mention these guidelines, because sometimes people abuse it, and in some cases, it might get so serious to the extent that sometimes the masjid don't allow people inside to do certain things which are normally allowed. So, for example, eating. Some masjids might not allow you to eat inside because people abuse that leverage. People abuse the fact that it's halal to eat inside the masjid, but they don't take into consideration adab, right? They don't take into consideration the akhlaq and the ethics and the adab about doing things. And as such, as they say, the good sometimes suffer for the bad because of this. Right? Sometimes people drink in the masjid. Maybe the children might, throw over juice or water or whatever it is, and nobody cleans it up. And as such, there's a general no eating in the masjid because of this. Right? So all of these things are allowed in the masjid, right? Playing and so on. I spoke of the prohibition of buying and selling inside the masjid, right? And we looked at some evidences, right, and some aqwal from the imams, right? Right, so we move on to some of points. After this, we'll conclude, right, because as we're just doing a recap, right? So as we mentioned that it is permissible to speak in the masjid, socialize on issues which are also not of a religious nature, as long as it does not comes under what is haram, right? Right, so we'll conclude here for today, and inshallah ta'ala next week, because I didn't want to go into the rest, the last part of it, because sometimes we need to refresh our minds and so on. So next week, inshallah, we'll look at some other rulings. So for example, the ruling of wearing shoes inside the masjid, right? And this is something that many people may not be aware of, that it's actually sunnah to pray with the shoes on. A lot of people don't know this, right? So we look at some of these rulings, and we'll finish this part of the Akhlaaq book, and we'll move on to the next volume, inshallah ta'ala. This is the last topic in this textbook, right? All right, so we'll stop here for today. Okay, it seems as Brother Tariq is not online, so we'll just stop here for today, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.